DWCS, Dana White's Contender Series fights taking place once again tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. On today's video breakdown, we're going to be taking a further look into the Season 3, Week 9 fight card, and a couple interesting fights that I'm looking forward to seeing. So, we'll get to those in a minute. And before we even get to that, the teller has to put out a quick PSA announcement. The teller highly recommends you guys are careful on how much money you're betting on cards like this. You have to be very careful. I don't want to see anybody betting more than 5% of their bankroll on events like this. There's just way too many X factors in these types of fights. Certain patterns you're going to see in the beginning of these fighters' careers can rapidly change. And there's not a lot of fight tape out there. And you just really have to be careful, I'm telling you. These are very green fighters. They could be unreliable at times. So keep an eye out for that. Definitely don't want to see any of you guys putting out 40 to 50% of your bankrolls, because your account will be completely turned on its back in one night. I'm telling you, all types of things happen on these types of cards. And if you were to look into the analytics of betting on Dana White's Contender Series, playing the underdog long term probably would have profited you. If you take a look back at the numbers event to event, there's been a lot of dogs that have came through, especially more than your average pay-per-view event or your average fight night event. So that's something to take into consideration. Me personally, that's not enough for me. I'm not a guy that likes to look into data and stuff like that. I really like to have my edge on tape. I like to see it in front of my eyes. I like to know that I have the better fighter stepping into the cage that my money is being backed on. So, that's not how I roll, but just keep that in mind. If you don't have enough evidence of fight tape there to make you feel comfortable in picking a certain fighter, but you just feel like you have to bet on this fight because you're sitting there, you paid for your ESPN Plus subscription, and you want to bet on these events, maybe you want to go play the dog for the majority of your plays in that situation. But then again, I don't recommend that type of betting, period, point blank. But, again, I can't stop you guys from doing what you guys want to do. And if you, like I said, if you want to have action, don't just keep milking these favorites in these events, because your account will be dry by the time the end of this Season 3 is going to be done. I'm telling you guys. So just be careful with that. And I think it's about time we start breaking down this card here. So let's do it. So if we take a look at the first fight of tonight's event, we got Steele taking on Caracappa. I was a little surprised that they put this fight as the first fight of tonight's event. I kind of thought this would be more towards a co-main event, or if not a main event spot. The main event, we pretty much already had that solidified with Shabazz Ian hopping in there, and it's a higher weight class, more potential for an exciting finish. I get that. And but this fight right here, this guy Steele, this guy's already a tough veteran. He's an entertaining fighter. He has a karate striking background, and it carries over pretty good into his MMA game. Has a lot of volume with his strikes. Right now he's undefeated as a pro, 5-0. So this guy has shown some potential. He's been around the game for a while, and he's had some time to marinate. So, but this guy that he's fighting, this guy Phil, he's no joke. Training out of New Jersey. This dude's 8-0 as a pro. Solid wrestling background. Got that Jersey-style wrestling. The dude's beat notable guys like Louis Gaudinot. I don't know if you guys remember him. He was on the Ultimate Fighter flyweight season. So, just a notable guy. But, Phil had some size in that fight, and Phil used his wrestling to pull off the victory. And Phil's shown that he could use his wrestling pretty good in a lot of his fights. From the footage I was able to pull up, dude's a solid grappler. And his striking definitely needs to be polished up. Throws wild hooks. Needs to start straightening up those strikes, throw them down the pipe. I really don't like the way he was throwing his punches. But he has that X factor. You could tell. He can grind guys out. He's in phenomenal shape. He gets the takedowns, at least on the guys that he's fought so far. Not the highest level of competition. But we're going to see. Is Steele going to be able to stuff those takedowns? Or, is Phil going to take him to the ground where I feel he'll have the edge? Otherwise I see Steele. It's hard to say, but I feel like Steele, if he stuffs those takedowns, I would have to lean that Ricky would have the edge in the feet based off his karate-style background and just the high amount of volume. I've seen it already on the Ultimate Fighter show. The guy, he throws decent kicks, mixes them up, high kicks. His punching's okay. Not too much power, but throws a lot of volume. So I could definitely see him winning a decision here if Phil's not able to get the takedown. But if Phil's able to use that wrestling and is able to get some takedowns, maybe work some ground and pound, even potentially get a finish, I could definitely see Phil winning the fight. So it's going to come down to that. I mean, who do you guys want, the grappler or the striker? And the line is it's pretty close. Actually, it's pretty much dead even right now. So about -115 each of these guys, and it's pretty much where I have it capped. I could see this fight going either way. Initially, I was on Ricky Steele, but this guy Phil, he's definitely live, and he has the wrestling behind him too. So that's a solid skill for your guy to have inside the cage when you got money on him. But this would not be a fight that I'd be touching gambling-wise. Again, if you guys want to bet in fights like this, go flip some coins out back. Up next, we have some women throwing down. We got another Italian woman's prospect getting a chance here at the Dana White's Contender Series show. That's Mikkel De Segni, who's going to be taking on Mallory Martin, who's 4-2. We'll get more to her in a second here. I want to talk about this girl, Mikkel. 7-2, as I stated, fighting out of Italy. She's all tatted up. She looks the part. From the footage I was able to pull up of her, she actually had decently impressive grappling, some nice inside trip takedowns, a couple of different fights. She was able to get the chicks down to the ground. The only problem I had with the fight footage that I saw of her, it was the level of skill that the opponents that she was versing had. I mean, it's nice to see that she does know how to implement those certain moves, but you could tell that her opponents had absolutely nothing. They didn't know how to stuff a takedown for the life of them. But again, I mean, this shows that she is getting proper training and she's learning these skills here. But I mean, she had one fight against a Brazilian opponent who has a decent record. She lost that fight. It's a little bit of a red flag. I think when you put her up against some of these more real type of women's fighters, she's going to have a problem until she escalates her game. Kind of similarly to the last Italian chick that fought in the last card, who seemed very tough, athletic. Just needs to polish up her game a little bit. This girl, Mallory Martin, 4-2. She's fought some decent competition for sure. I mean, she fought Maisie Barber. Did not look that good. It was very early in her career, early in both of their careers. She didn't look good at all, though. Maisie Barber was just completely outclassing her. Pulled off the decision, but just outclassed her. She does have a win against Tiffany Masters. Tiffany Masters was a chick that fought on Dana White Contender Series a season ago, I believe. I mean, so that's one of her notable wins. Mallory has a Muay Thai background. She's training over there at Tiger Muay Thai, or she's at least put some time over there. And, I mean, that's a good thing, so her striking should come around. But from what I've seen on tape, it's very slow, very, very slow. It almost feels like you're watching the video in slow motion when she's throwing. So, to me, that's a major red flag in itself because, at least Mikkel, she's somewhat athletic, so it's kind of dangerous. You got a girl like Mallory who she has the skills, but she's just not athletic in there. Her body's, it's kind of, I don't know how, I want to make sure I say this correctly. It's not that toned. She doesn't look to be in that great a shape. So, I mean, I would not feel comfortable in the least right putting up any type of money on Mallory at where the line is right now. So I think that's a dog or pass type of fight. Very green fighters. And that girl Mikkel, she has 9 fights. She has more fights than Mallory. So although it was on a different type of scene, she has some experience there. So don't be surprised. But if you're gonna base who you think has a more likely chance to win this fight, based off competition level, where they're training, and the general scene that they're around, okay, I get it. Mallory Martin to win this fight, but I think the line maybe should be a little bit closer. Up next, we got a solid fight here. Steve Garcia taking on Desmond Torres. Talk about Desmond here for a second. Very young fighter, only 22 years old. He's coming off of 3 straight arm triangle chokes in a row. So this dude, he definitely has some jiu-jitsu. I mean, that's more of a simple submission, to be honest with you. That's one of the subs that a lot of people, white belts and whatnot, start to learn early in the game. But that's nevertheless is still pretty impressive to string 3 of those in a row. I mean, but if you look at the level of competition, it's not the greatest, so you could see maybe how he's getting that done. And but the dude definitely has good jiu-jitsu. I mean, there's videos you could pull up of him in the jiu-jitsu scene. He's doing his thing out there. It's definitely probably his strength. He's been a pro since 2017, so relatively new to the game. And then he's taking on the guy in Steve Garcia. This guy, Steve Garcia, training out of Jackson Wink, 27 years old. I mean, he's 3-3 in his last 6 fights, but I don't think that necessarily sets the narrative of this fight because, this guy, Steve Garcia, he's been locked in there before with a guy like Joe Warren in Bellator. Joe Warren's a staple of Bellator. It's one thing just to say that you fought in a promotion as of Bellator, which is pretty much, top 3 promotions in the world. But to have taken a guy on like Joe Warren, who's, I believe he was an Olympic I don't know if he ever medaled or whatnot, but I think he competed in the Olympics with Greco-Roman or whatnot, wrestling. Solid fighter, staple of Bellator. So to lock horns with a guy like Joe Warren, that's a notch on his belt right there. Then he lost to a guy in Ricky Terrios. That's a Dana White Contender Series vet too. Showed to have some decent skills. So at least those guys are reputable opponents. 27 years old. He's been a pro since 2013. So this guy's been in the game a lot longer than his opponent Desmond Torres here. I'm going to lean Steve Garcia, excuse me. I just feel that, he's been around the block a little bit longer. Training at a camp like Jackson Wink, this guy has locked horns. He is locking horns on a daily basis with some of the best fighters in the world. So just keep that in mind. This guy is, he's grinding, like I said, been a pro since 2013. He's 27 years old now, got in the game at a young age. A lot of times you'll see these fighters start to their full game starts to come around. They start to just become very well-rounded fighters. So, I'll take Steve Garcia to win this fight. Unless Desmond Torres, this guy is really a jiu-jitsu stud and pulls something out. Looks to be a little bit more athletic, looks a little bit more in shape than Steve Garcia. Steve Garcia is not so imposing physically, but definitely he's putting in the work, that's for sure. So, up next, this should be an interesting one here. We got Marcos the Hawk Burgau taking on Jamal Pois. And this guy Marcos, man, you take a look at him here in the picture. He's got the championship belts dangling over his shoulder. He's 11-0. He's only 23 years old. From what I've seen on him in tape, it was nothing that was that impressive. The tape didn't look like how I thought it might have looked when I saw his record and what I initially saw from the guy. Definitely needs to polish up his skills. This guy has been locking horns with guys that are just not on the level, for sure. And it's a lot more than just their records. As you could look into the records of the guys that he's defeated, you could see it on tape. you could see it in his fights. There was one guy that he fought. He was able to mount him, and it just looked way too easy. The guy had nothing on the ground. And, I hate to say it like that, but, a victory like that, it's almost a wash. So you don't want to look too much into those victories because almost anyone's going to go out there and defeat guys like that. Just don't look too much into that. He needs to work on his physique a lot more. He's chubby. He needs to work on his diet. I feel like that can help him excel his game a lot more. There's no excuse to be 23 years old looking the way that he does. He's obviously taking the game serious, as far as, this guy's a lot of pro fights, and you could see he wants to become, he wants to fight in the UFC. He's fighting here on Dana White's Contender Series. Fucking diet, man. Cut out the rice and the potatoes and all that Brazilian food. Whatever you're eating, rice and beans, all that shit, man. Lean out the diet and come on, get a little toned over here and start taking your career to the next level. And then you got this guy Jamal, 6'2", 23 years old as well. This guy, look at his physique as well. Both these guys. But again, these guys are very green in their career. They're gonna have to mature. They have a lot of things to learn as far as the game goes, and they will hopefully learn from their mistakes and slowly bring their game to another level. But I'm sorry to harp on that, but first things first, I'm going to talk about things when they're glaring to me like that. These guys' physiques was very disappointing. You guys can look at them at the weigh-ins. But, that doesn't mean everything. So this guy Jamal, the guys that he's beat, his last 2 wins that he's had, the guys had a combined record of 0-4. So you want to talk about opponents that are not on the level. That speaks for itself. He does have a win against this guy Kyle Noblet, who is 10-2, who trains with Zach Cummings. So I know that guy's a decent fighter. He's shown he could actually beat a guy that's a decent fighter. So don't look too much into his last 2 opponents that he's beat. He's a boxer. He's going to walk you down, try to throw hands. That's everything I saw on tape was all about the hands. This guy likes to throw fists, try to knock you out with the hands. So we'll see if his hands are going to be enough for Marcos Burgau's well-rounded game, because Marcos seems to be pretty decent. Gets finishes with some subs, gets some finish with the strikes. I'm going to lean Marcos in this fight, but this fight's very, very close. It can go either way. Again, this is a fight that I don't really want anything to do with. So on to the main event, and rightfully so. When you got a guy with the last name like Shabazz Ian, right now, I think it's his cousin Edmund Shabazz Ian. He's brought some hype to the name, put Glendale Fight Club back on the map. So this main event's rightfully so. And this guy Philip Rowe that he's taken on, solid fighter. I'll give him that. From what I've seen on tape, he's a solid fighter as well. So this fight should be good here. Leon Shabazz Ian, 23 years old, 6'4", fighting out of Glendale Fight Club, as I said. You guys know the deal with Glendale Fight Club. That's where Ronda Rousey was the staple years ago. As of recently, some of these young Armenian guys are coming out of that camp, and they're showing to be pretty solid fighters. So Leon Shabazz Ian, BJJ guy, in my opinion. Everything I've seen from him, it seems that his jiu-jitsu game is pretty much on point. He's trying to get the striking to come around with that, though. But at the same time, it's kind of like that tall man's striking ability. He looks a little bit like baby deer on ice skates in there, kind of a little wobbly on the feet. So that's one thing to look into, because Philip Rowe, this guy, he has hands. You know, he's in there. He's athletic. He's coordinated on the feet. He's going to have the edge as far as that goes, in my opinion. But at the same time, it's hard to explain. Like, Leon has some skills. You could see his hook's nice and tight, but his footwork is a little wobbly.